Today was the day Seoul should be holding talks with North Korea on arranging reunions for separated families. However, like the offer of military talks, no response. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Kwon Jang-ho joins us in the studio to make sense of the situation. Jang-ho, thank you for joining us today. Now, let's start with a brief outline of the current situation.
Sure, Daniel. So, earlier this month on July 4th, President Moon Jae-in gave an address in Berlin where he outlined his North Korea policy vision. In it, he pledged to start dialogue with the regime, first to engage in military talks to end hostile activity on the border, and second to hold talks for reunions for separated families. On his return to Seoul, the government sent a message to Pyongyang proposing the talks to be held on July 21st and August 1st, respectively. However, those dates have now passed and there's been no response or even any acknowledgement of the offers from North Korea.
Right, North Korea ignoring the olive branch and, of course, giving us the silent treatment, giving us the cold shoulder. What can we take away from this response?
Well, I don't think anyone expected it to be easy. I mean, North Korea usually likes to do things in their own way and in their own time. So we are perhaps first expecting North Korea to rebuff the proposal and then come back with a counteroffer. This current protracted silence was perhaps a little unexpected. But I met with one expert who says it's not necessarily a bad sign.
Normally, when North Korea rejects South Korea's offers, it does it directly. For example, if you look at the past two administrations, when North Korea had a grievance, it expressed it within 2 to 3 days. But this time, the regime has not made any official response. They're also not making direct criticisms of the Moon administration. Pyongyang is not openly rejecting Seoul's offer, but it is showing that it wants to take things forward on its own terms.
Well, the reclusive regime does have its back to the wall, and it's going to take a mile if you're given an inch. They're considering the options right now, trying to keep their tactics open, it seems. And of course, South Korea has given them the capability to do that because we are keeping the door for talks open.
Yes, that's right. So yesterday, the Unification Ministry made a statement saying that the lack of response doesn't change the administration's policy of pursuing both talks and sanctions, and they call on North Korea to respond to the offer of talks soon.
But of course, there was the recent missile launch. Some could interpret that as a clear snub towards Seoul's policies.
Well, not necessarily. Obviously, the missile launch was a concerning event, especially considering the leap it showed in its technical capabilities to reach the mainland US. There have been some calls for the Moon administration to reconsider its North Korea policy, and it could be a test of Moon's resolve to stick with the administration's current direction. However, the ICBM is also more largely seen as an act of defiance against the US and the international community rather than Seoul, and so therefore does not necessarily affect Seoul's pursuit of dialogue.
An ICBM is a long-range ballistic missile. Therefore, it is aimed at pressuring the U.S. rather than South Korea, especially if you look at the timing, which came right after U.S. House passed sanction bills on Russia, Iran, and North Korea. The launch was about sending a message to Washington rather than a rejection of Seoul's offer for talks.
Well, it looks like North Korea has met the right administration to test our patience. Certainly, they did not put a full stop. They did not reject our offer right away. And as you mentioned, the missile test is not a message to us, but instead the U.S. But of course, we will continue to wait while keeping an eye open for further provocations from up north.
Right. One point I would like to make before I go quickly is that among all this inter-Korean politics is a humanitarian issue. Now, today's deadline was for the talks on the reunion of separated families. And there are some 65,000 registered South Koreans who are waiting to take part in these reunions after being separated from their loved ones over 60 years ago by the Korean War. But time is running out for those surviving as more and more of those registered war-torn family members pass away over the years. And so the quicker response we get from North Korea, the more hope there will be for them.
Right, thank you so much for making time for us today, and thank you again for highlighting that very important fact for our viewers. Thank you again for coming in, Jang-ho.
Thank you for having me.